Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to ShoutCraft America. It is the round of 8. The quarterfinals are upon us. We've had 4 great group stages, but now things are getting real. There is more money on the line. There is, of course, access to the round of 4 and even a shot at getting through to the grand finals, which will be held in New York. And both players will be flown out at MLG's expense to go and compete in the studio. Should be a really fun event. My name is TotalBiscuit, and today I'm joined by special guest caster Greg IdrA. Welcome to the show.
Hey there, thanks for having me.
It's all good. It's all good. So, we haven't heard you cast in quite some time, if I recall correctly. When was the last event that you were involved in? Was it a Masters Cup?
Probably would be. The last live event I casted was the NASL Finals with In Control up in Toronto. So that was quite a few months ago. So the last thing was probably the Masters Cup series, yeah. Fantastic.
Now, things have changed a little bit, obviously, over the past couple of weeks for you. You've changed your focus. You recently announced that you've basically retired as a competitive player, but you are still part of the Starcraft scene as a player, a caster, and a personality.
Yeah, that's true. Competitive gaming just wasn't really satisfying me anymore. I wanted to move on to new stuff, and my casting has always gotten a lot of positive feedback. It's really fun, and it seems like a good application of everything I've picked up over the years of playing, so I felt like that was the next natural step for me.
Sounds fantastic. Well, we will be seeing whether or not that's the case, because you're going to be casting the round of 8. Now, all of these guys are players that you've faced in the past.
Yeah, pretty much everyone. Everyone obviously from North America, so they all play on the North American ladder, so we practice against each other day in and day out. And actually, a lot of them are more new, upcoming players who haven't played a ton of big tournaments in the past, so I don't have a lot of tournament experience against them, and we haven't seen a lot from a lot of them.
Yeah.
But they are the players I get to play just regularly on ladder, so I do know quite a bit about how they play and how they handle the game.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things about this tournament, I think, is that we do see a lot of players that don't compete an awful lot in these tournaments, and it's weird because when they do, they often play in a really different way. You expressed surprise before the show, actually. We were talking a little bit about Drunken Boy's play being one of only 2 players to actually advance through their group stage without dropping a map. And you were quite surprised to hear that he did that with macro games, pretty much nothing but macro games.
Yeah, a lot of the times you'll get more established players, like Minigun, for instance. If you watch his group's games, they're exactly what you expect from him. They're completely in line with his normal style. But Drunken Boy, he's much more of him, and Hello Kitty and all the other newer players. They are much more of they have much more of a wild card factor, just because everyone's not experienced with the full range of their play. Like, you get them on ladder, you get them in some tournaments, they'll do the normal cheesy stuff that you expect from them. But then, obviously, no one really knows exactly what they can do because no one's seen all that much from them. And so then every once in a while they can bust out a macro game and just beat some of the top players in the tournament, in the group stage, like exactly what happened with Drunken Boy.
Yeah, it was pretty surprising. And you, as a player who has competed in a metric ton of tournaments, and yet you do a ton of ladder practice as well. For those uninitiated, can you explain the biggest differences between competing on ladder and competing in a tournament format?
It's not, since this is an online tournament up until the finals, it's not as big of a deal, but normally in competitive play, nerves become a very big factor, especially for some inexperienced players like what we're going to be seeing today. With the exception of, even Minigun actually has a lot of problems with nerves online, or at offline tournaments. A lot of the players here don't have a ton of tournament experience, and usually the biggest factor for newer players like that is the nerves and dealing with the competition, because there's a very big difference between sitting in your room playing ladder games, no pressure, sometimes not even viewership, and then you go up on stage or you go on a platform like this and you're paying for thousands of dollars and for the recognition of all of your fans and whatnot. And especially right now, like, these are people who are competing for a fan base to push them forward into this kind of new era of American Starcraft that's coming forward with WCS and then great tournaments like ShoutCraft and whatnot. So this is like a very important time for these up-and-coming players to prove themselves, and that's a ton of pressure that they're not used to dealing with if they're normally just ladder players. So gameplay-wise, if they're smart, they're going to do what they're comfortable with. They're not going to let themselves be bullied by emotion and nerves and whatnot. But the biggest thing is just going to be trying to maintain the level of play they're capable of throughout all the extra pressure that they're going to be under.
Absolutely. That sounds like a really great piece of insight into the kind of mindset that these guys are going to have to be dealing with. And we have a mixture of players that have some tournament experience and those that really, really do not. And I think that's exemplified reasonably well by the first matchup, which will be Puck versus Goswser. And I'd certainly say that Goswser definitely has more, certainly offline tournament experience, especially lately. He was one of the players that competed in MLG Dallas and was actually able to some degree, stand up to a Korean opponent, although he was not able to defeat him. He did take a map from him. And then, of course, we have ROOTPuck, who does compete in online events, but not so many offline events. And I think it's probably safe to say that they don't have... he doesn't have as much tournament experience as Goswser.
No, Puck has been going to MLGs a decent amount, but he was always mostly a bracket player. It hasn't really had too much success. Occasionally taking a series or at least a map off a good established player, but not really never making it into the group stages or anything like that. And not even competing too much online because there haven't been that many big online tournaments in the past in Wings of Liberty. Whereas Goswser, still kind of a newer face to the scene, not someone a lot of international fans might recognize just yet, but he's actually been having quite a bit of success. He played in the EG Kingston tournament, where he beat quite a few good players and was actually one of the few who qualified for the offline finals in the first place. And then he's always had a little bit of success at MLGs, knocking out good players here and there, and like you said, qualifying for this last one. So he definitely has the experience advantage, but neither of these is like a hardened veteran, but I would definitely have to give the edge to Goswser in terms of that.
Definitely. We'll have a look at the bracket before we go into the first face-off interview between these two players. I'd like to remind everyone, of course, that ShoutCraft.com is your information source for this tournament, and is also the place where, if you so desire, you can toss a couple of dollars the way of the players in the form of a tip via the PayPal tip jar, which is always very much appreciated by the players, and it's a really great way to support the pros that are putting out plays that you enjoy, or just players that you think really do deserve that financial support. If you're willing to tip your wager, then as far as I'm concerned, you should be willing to tip your StarCraft pros. Now, we'll have a look at the bracket here. The first matchup, of course, is going to be Puck versus Goswser. That is Root versus Millenium. And then we will go down, and the next matchup, I think, to me, this is the matchup of the round of 8, in my honest opinion. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Kane versus QXC. Kane comes into this tournament with a huge amount of hype. Yeah, for a long time, he was one of the top-ranked players on the North American ladder. And I'm not honestly sure where a lot of the hype has come from. I think it's mostly from the fact that he actually doesn't play too many tournaments. He doesn't go to a lot of MLGs. He's still a really young kid in school and whatnot, so he doesn't have time to really compete a ton. But everyone knows he's good, knows he performs well on ladder, knows he beats these top players on ladder. But they haven't gotten to see him do that yet, and that kind of mystery around him creates a lot of hype. So everyone definitely wants to see him play. And then as for the matchup, it's going to kind of depend on which QXC comes. Because QXC is a very versatile player. He has a ton of different styles. And he pulls everything out from either really weird stuff like his Mass Widowmine style that's gotten a lot of attention to just straight up generic play, turtle mech. He can do pretty much anything. And sometimes it looks amazing and sometimes it just falls flat on his face because the opponent happens to figure out what weird thing he's doing and counter it. So that could either be amazing or Kane. I think it's honestly entirely possible that Kane could just roll over him. Yeah, we actually saw QXC play in the group stage yesterday, and he looked shakier than I would have expected. I think going into that group, most people would have said QXC was the favorite versus 3 teamless players, but in fact, he did lose to State 2-1, and he had to struggle against Xenocider, finishing with a 5-3 map score record. So QXC is looking a little bit more vulnerable, I think, than most people would have expected going into this. Kane, on the other hand, is looking pretty much unstoppable. But, of course, we haven't had the chance to really see an awful lot from him. We saw him take down Massa, and then, of course, we saw him take out Hello Kitty. That's not a big enough representative sample, I feel, to really assess the skill level of Kane.
No, but the thing is, we know that he has the skill because of those ladder performances and whatnot, and it was just a matter of whether or not he would be able to bring it on a competitive stage. And so beating those lesser players, it's not the biggest deal. It's not like beating another high-level pro, but it is demonstrating that he can still do what he does, except when people are watching. So there is something to it, but you're right. It's definitely going to take a lot more from him to really prove that he earned the hype. But beating QXC would probably go a long way towards that.
Certainly, and I think that that very much is a vital skill that you have to inherit, and a couple of players in this tournament unfortunately did not, and as a result they underperformed in their groups. Now, Minigun versus Drunken Boy. Drunken Boy, the second player to go through 4-0 in his group, looking pretty strong, and surprisingly so, in the sense, as we mentioned earlier, that he was playing macro games, he was playing very, very good macro games, and he wasn't doing this one-base, aggressive kind of cheesy play that we have seen from him in the past. And he's going to be facing up against an old tournament favorite, someone that does have a lot of competitive experience in the form of Root Minigun.
Yeah, I didn't watch Drunken Boy's group games because they're all TVZs, and I felt like I had a pretty good handle on his TVZ. I knew what he does just from playing against him on the ladder. But then you told me that he just did straight up macro games throughout all of them, including beating people like GhostUser. So that was really just shocking to me, because even when he doesn't do the one-base all-in, he's very much so an aggressive player. He loves Hellbat drops. He loves two-base attacks, if not one-base attacks. And even in tournament play, like we saw him take out Mia in the WCS qualifier with that one-base double reactor Hellion SCV all-in, which is about as all-in as you can get.
Pretty much.
If he does it on that stage, and you kind of figure that's just his play style. He's just a cheesy player. So to then bust out macro games and take out those guys, that's really surprising. And originally, I kind of expected Minigun to just beat him pretty easily, because Minigun plays really, really safely, really conservatively early on. He likes to just get up into that heavy macro game, and that seemed like it would perfectly counter Drunken Boy. But if he is capable of actually playing those macro games, then that could be a much more interesting series than I thought.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see how that one goes down, especially in the best of 5, because as most people would say, the best of 5 mindset is a little bit different from the best of 3. Maybe he does toss one of those cheesy builds in there, but if it's anything to go by looking at the group stage, then it will be macro all around, and I'm interested to see that. And then, last but by no means least, we do have a player that is definitely a cheesy player, but seems to have a bigger selection of cheese than your average Walmart. I mean, it was Hello Kitty who broke out cheesy build after cheesy build, all sorts of different stuff, and actually did show some pretty damn good decision-making, and did make him got him out of his group in second place. And then he's going to be facing off against State, who showed a pretty dominant performance against QXC and against Xenocider, taking out QXC 2-1 and then taking out Xenocider 2-0 to advance from his group in first place.
Yeah, that matchup could be pretty crazy, just given how diverse PvP is right now. It's gotten to a point where almost any build and any composition can work as long as you keep unit counters in mind. We've gone past, for the most part, past the Mass Void Ray beats everything stage. So when you have two players who are willing to play aggressive and take risks, and especially someone like Hello Kitty, who's been practicing his cheesing through the ladder for the last 2 years, you know, he has a big build repertoire, and they're all really abusive and funky and weird.
Yep.
So that matchup with those players, I don't really have any idea what we're going to see out of them.
No, I don't have a clue either. And Hello Kitty is, as you said, just insane when it comes to the number of builds he can bust out. And it's really hard to predict what exactly it's going to be, except it's probably going to involve either 1 or 2 bases.
Yeah. Well, he does have a 3-base Colossus all in PvZ that he does quite a bit, so you can't limit him that much. But it's definitely going to be something weird and aggressive out of him.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's always exciting to see what Hello Kitty actually breaks out. Now, our first matchup is going to be Puck versus GhostUser, so I'm going to be bringing them both into the call so that we can have a few words between these two. Now, if you were to pull out a prediction on this one, Greg, what would you call? It's so hard to call, I think. I mean, even if you look at the rankings that have been posted, the latest thing on Team Liquid is to post the Aligulik predictions. And everything is looking really, really even going into this one, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, my problem is that I don't really know GhostUser's ZVP that well. It seems like every tournament match he plays is ZVT or ZVZ, and obviously when we play, it's ZVZ. And he is definitely quite a good player. But Puck is he designs very smart, abusive builds, and it's the kind of thing that you really have to know is coming. And presumably they've played on ladder, and GhostUser has some idea what Puck is capable of and will prepare for that. And in that case, I'd give a definite edge to GhostUser. I feel he is the better overall player. But if anyone can come up with something that's going to catch him off guard in a really difficult to deal with way, it's going to be Puck. But I would give a slight edge to GhostUser, maybe 3-2, with some very silly games involved.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see this because if these statistics are anything to go by, it's going to be super close and it's going to be really, really good to watch. We're just going to bring them in on the call, get their cams on, and then once we've done that, we can have a little bit of a face-off interview between these two guys. And Goswser, of course, is still playing from Europe right now. He is in France and has been told that if he reaches the grand finals, as soon as the round 4 ends, he has to basically get on a plane, otherwise he's not going to reach the studio in time. But that'll be amusing to say the least. Just bringing these two guys in right now, and then we'll see what they have to say for themselves. There we go. Just a little bit of setup time required. Now, in the meantime, guys, if there is anything else that you do want to know about this tournament, then feel free to look at shoutcraft.com. And also, I would strongly recommend that you check out the Liquipedia page as well. The guys over at Liquipedia are doing a phenomenal job of keeping everybody completely up to date on what's been going on with this tournament. They're often quicker than we are, so I would suggest that you go and have a look over there. And that's also a really good place to have a look at the brackets and make your predictions as well. It will show you exactly the race distribution as well as information on nationalities and all sorts of things like that. Okay, we have Puck and Goswser available right here in the call. So, Goswser, welcome back.
Hello.
How are you doing this fine morning? I believe it's the evening over there in France.
Yep, 8:15. I'm doing pretty well.
Excellent. You're still doing okay surrounded by the French people, right?
Yeah.
You
It's all
survived.
good.
That's, as a British man, I applaud your bravery. Now, Goswser, you were able to make it through your group, although you did finish in second place. Was it quite surprising, the amount of resistance that you faced in that group?
No. Drunken Boy just caught me off guard, and that's it.
Fair enough. How are you feeling about your Zerg versus Protoss?
Well, Protoss is kind of, I feel like it has a definite advantage right now in HOTS, but in practice games the last couple of days, I've been winning about 80% of my games, I think. So, against good players too, so I think I'm comfortable.
Puck, welcome back.
Hello.
Now, you managed to make your way through your group in first place. I think you convinced an awful lot of people there. Really, really good result from you. Now you have to face up against Goswser, which is kind of like getting out of the frying pan and into the fire. How do you feel about that?
Pretty confident. I played him in Acer Team Cup or whatever, and he left without GGing, so I think he's very uncomfortable versus me.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Leaving without GGing is a sign that I'm uncomfortable.
I don't really agree with that.
I'm sorry, that was funnier than it should have been. Alright, anyway. So, Puck, you did face off against him quite recently. He left without GGing, so this is now a best-of-5 series. Acer Team Story Cup is, of course, a best-of-1. Do you really feel that a best-of-1 single map in a team event is actually representative of your ability against Goswser?
It's pretty one-sided, so
Best
Alright.
of ones is where Protoss is best. That's why you see them owning in Pro League all the time, and then losing in everything else.
no. I honestly think Goswser is a pretty good player, but we've had a pretty long history, so I'm sure he spent all last night thinking about what he's going to say today and forgot to actually practice, so I think I'll be fine.
Okay. Alright. Well, Goswser, since you spent all last night preparing what to say, do you have any final words for Puck before we go into this game?
I didn't actually spend any time thinking of what I'm going to say, but I think IdrA and Puck were the two players I wanted to knock out of a tournament the most, because both of them have kind of a bad reputation on ladder. And I didn't get to play IdrA, unfortunately, but I'm happy that I'll be able to knock Puck out of this.
Of course, Goswser, you are the peak of politeness on ladder at all times, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Puck, your final words for your opponent today before we enter this best-of-5.
Best of luck. I guess this will be the end for you, so hope to see you at the next lands in America.
Alright, guys, to your stations. Let's get ready to rock and roll. This is going to be a good match, one way or the other, I think. It's so nice to see banter between friends, isn't it, Greg?
It really is. It makes it much more exciting, and especially now they have to back it up.
Yes, they very much do. You can't brag if you don't have any means to actually back that one up. We're going to be going into the lobby very shortly. First map's going to be Star Station. Now, recent change for the tournament, since the tournament very much follows the ladder, we will be using Star Station with cross spawns only. I'd love to hear what your thoughts on Star Station, actually. This has been a map that's been vetoed quite a bit in this tournament so far.
I feel this is a really good map. Again, I don't really know Ghostbuster's CVP style that well, but I feel that this is a really good map for Zerg in general versus Protoss. That's a pretty general consensus. And the big reason is that Protoss gets really strong if you let them to get to the late game and they manage to secure 4 bases and a bunch of tech. But in the mid game, that's where Zerg really shines. The mobility and strength of the mutas, the new Hydra, just the generic strength of roachling attacks before 200 supply, all of that against a very exposed third. Like we have on this map, that all works out really well for Zerg, because what Zerg wants to do is be putting pressure on their opponent before it actually gets into that late game situation, and a difficult to defend third is the biggest factor in whether or not that's likely to work. And this map, Star Station, probably has the most exposed third in the competitive map pool right now. So I would be really surprised if we don't see Ghostbuster trying to apply some pressure there, and I would also be pretty surprised if it doesn't work quite well.
Yeah, you're totally right in that respect. It's every time I've seen a pro actually take a third on this map, it has been the point of contention, which has basically made or break the game for them. And if they can hold on to that third, they generally are the guys that end up winning. It's such a strange map in that respect. It often starts off very, very passively and then just explodes once it gets to the 3 base point. We'll be going into this momentarily. Of course, it will be a Puck versus a Ghostbuster. It's best of 5. That means that with our 5-map pool, everything is currently in play, and it's the loser picks format. A coin flip determined who picked the first map, and then, of course, whoever loses will be able to pick from the remaining maps in the pool. And if we go all the way to 5 games, it will be whatever is left. So there's a little bit of strategy involved. Neither of these guys would, of course, want to end up on a map that they're not particularly comfortable with, but considering it is a ladder map pool, chances are they're pretty well practiced at all of it.
Yeah, did Ghostbuster win the map pick? Is this his choice?
That is a great question. Let me double check for you.
I would be very, very surprised if Puck chose this. If he did,
it's actually Puck's choice.
That's very surprising. Maybe he wants to get out of the way. The other option is that Puck really, really likes abusive, high-tech, kind of greedy early on, and then transitioning into a very powerful 2-base all-in kind of build. And so maybe he has something special like that prepared for this, and that's what we're going to see out of him. Because this is just definitely not a good map for Protoss if it's going to go into a macro game. Like you said, that 3rd base is always a point of contention, and Zerg wants to have a point of contention in the mid-game, because that's when they want the fights to happen.
Indeed. Well, I'm intrigued, certainly, and you may very well be right. You've got Puck actually playing a legitimate best of 5 here, rather than saying, oh, I don't like this map. But he knows that that map is going to be involved in one way or the other. So, as we have a couple of early game jitters, which will hopefully even themselves out, welcome to Star Station, and the first map of this best of 5 series in the ShoutCraft America round of 8 to the northwest position in the Red Trunks playing Protoss. It is ROOTPuck versus his opponent to the southeast position in the Blue Trunks playing Zerg. Playing from France right now, it is Millenium.Goswser. Now, Puck immediately going to the front here, looking to start with the wall off. Most likely going to be a Forge Fast Expand play here from Puck. A little bit safe.
Yeah, this is not... You will see Gateway Expansion on pretty much every map every once in a while now, because the power of the Mothership Core along with various gateway rushes make that just kind of a generically good build choice. But this is not an especially good map for it, because obviously with cross positions it's quite long, so the rush distance makes all of those kinds of builds worse. So it's not really surprising to see this, but particularly from Puck. Puck's very much so a Nexus first, Forge first kind of player. You almost never see Gateway Expansion out of him, so not particularly surprising. Big point here is that it is cross map only. On ladder, obviously all 4 positions are open, but cross map only, that's actually a very, very long rush distance, which actually makes that third a little bit easier to secure, so it kind of changes the way this map works in general. It also lets both players know where their opponent is going to start, so there's no ambiguity about scout timings or anything. It's not like you're just going to be able to go 10 pool and hope that Puck doesn't scout it in time, because since it is a 2-player map, we're going to see much more generic gameplay, and they don't have to worry as much early on because of that lack of scouting information.
Yeah, and it's a strange paradigm as well because, as you accurately mentioned, this map on ladder used to be all 4 positions available. As of yesterday, they actually changed it to cross only. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, which
I
is
did
really,
not know that.
Yep, that apparently just happened last night. I was informed by my admin, which is why we can sort of change things around a little bit. And that's weird because that's not what these guys are used to. They have to keep the idea in mind that if they end up on this map on ladder, then the opponent could be anywhere.
Yeah, and even in other tournament editions, a lot of the time it's been vertical positions or horizontal positions will be disallowed, but then the other one is available, so it's still kind of a 3-player map. Yeah, I think this is this may actually be the first time they've played on it as a 2-player map, so it's definitely a little bit of a mix-up for them.
Yeah, I believe MLG uses the cross-spawn only version recently, but GSL uses the version that you described right there, so there is a little bit of variance in that.
Mm-hmm. And we see Ghost opening without a gas. This makes sense against Forge or Nexus first, and he's just not getting the scouting information. He would have had to put gas down a little bit earlier to be comfortable, so I think he definitely knows. Actually, a pause from Ghost User.
Most likely it could be a lag issue, actually. He's just going to try and resolve that. Every now and again, he seems to have a couple of lag problems, but yeah, we'll have a quick pause here as we go along. But sorry, Greg, as you were saying.
As I was saying, if your opponent is going gateway expansion or something like that, you obviously want to open up gas to get speedlings out to control any kind of early rush and anything that's possible because of that fast gateway. And so the fact that he didn't have any intention of opening up speed or gas or anything like that, he's probably pretty comfortable with the way Puck plays, the fact that he's going to be Nexus or Forge first, just because that's pretty much a staple of his style and something he's going to see every time on ladder, so he definitely knows what he's playing against, and so he is going to go gasless 3-base.
Alright, and we are back into the game. Everything all sorted out now. I'm interested to see what Puck decides to do behind this. There's a couple of ways that you can get out of this Forge defensive kind of build here, and the Gateway +1 pressure is perhaps one of the classics, and that is often augmented by the fact that you have the Mothership core now, so things can be a little bit funkier. But we have seen quite a lot of Protoss also going for a heavier Stargate play. We used to see a couple of Void Rays in the +1 Gateway pressure, but now we're actually seeing people throwing in Phoenixes and occasionally even an Oracle into this matchup. Now, having seen Puck play in this particular matchup, what kind of strategy would you expect coming from him?
Yeah, I'd say if there is a standard, a go-to build in PvZ right now, it's the 5 Phoenix into a 3rd base with pretty fast Colossus, but I really don't think we're going to see that from Puck. Puck really likes very heavy tech builds, not so many +1 Warp Gate rushes or anything like that, but very much so the fast 4 gases, fast Stargate, and then a fast robotics afterwards, and then some Void Rays and followed up with an Immortal or a Colossus all in. That seems to be his go-to cheesy kind of build if he wants to catch his opponents off guard or get a free win or an early win. And that would be good on this kind of map. That is what comes to mind when I find out that he actually chose this as the first map for the series. Do something like that, get a bad map out of the way, maybe get a free win just based off the strategy. And we do see those really early 2 gases coming down before even the 6-minute mark at Puck's natural. So that definitely could be the case.
Yeah, we also see a second Forge actually following up here, which is... that
is very strange.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I generally don't see a second Forge follow up this kind of opening with the Nexus then and the Forge at the front. And it's actually... it's stored really far back as well. And it seems like the positioning almost like Puck wants to hide it as much as possible from Overlord scouts from the southern position. What do you make of this? I mean, generally speaking, when I see the double Forge play, it's very much for this big Gateway Colossus timing on 3-3. What do you reckon?
It's definitely intended to be hidden, and we also see a Twilight Council going down.
Oh.
So, a couple of options there. Either going for a mid-game timing, like you said. However, that seems pretty unlikely on this map because to actually take a 3rd base, which would be necessary for a later, bigger timing, take a 3rd base while going all those upgrades, that would be really difficult to defend against any kind of aggression. So I think the more likely option is that it's going to be Blink Stalkers with very quick... I don't know, the Twilight Council actually opens up the possibility. We see the Twilight Council and the +1 weapon upgrade are timed to finish around the same time, so I think at least +2 weapons, at least +1 armors, that's already been started. Blink Stalker all in, maybe 2-2. I'm not really sure about the timings because this isn't a normal build. This isn't something you see people do. You don't see 2 Forges off 2 bases almost ever. So this is definitely something weird, something that Puck has thought out, and it's most likely a design build because again, I don't want to keep harping on it, but it is a very weird map choice for Puck. So almost definitely something that he has prepared for this kind of situation. And there we see a bunch of extra gateways go up. So almost definitely going to be a big upgraded Blink Stalker all in.
Yeah, we actually do have charge coming in, which is now that is just weird. Like, I don't think I've ever seen that. And Blink, the kind of +2/+2 Blink Stalker all in on the double forge is definitely not uncommon. Like, it's a pretty powerful build. Charge and then throwing the Templar Archives down indicates to me that we're looking for some kind of Chargelet Archon build, which is kind of unusual, I've got to say.
Very unusual, even more unusual. Like a 2/2 Blink Stalker all in. Blink Stalker all in is very common. Blink Stalker all ins with 2 forges, not very common.
Yeah.
Chargelet Zealot, or Chargelet Archon all ins with double forge. I don't think I've ever seen anyone do an actual build just like this. And we're actually up to 9 gateways now, so this is going to be a very, very heavy attack. Is there a forward pylon down here? There is a forward pylon up in the top right, and he'll move forward, put down another pylon as he starts to get aggressive with that. We see a bunch of Hydras and Roaches on the way from Ghostwser, though, and that's exactly what you want to hold this off. The Hydras are going to provide great DPS in the background. The Roaches are one of the only things that can actually tank the damage from the Zealots and the Archons, and really the army is just not too big just yet from Puck. So really, the only thing that's going against Ghostwser here is that he doesn't really have any creep spread at all, and he doesn't have any spine crawlers. So he doesn't have any help holding this off, but he has a very good unit composition to try and fight this army versus army.
I'm interested to see how... Ooh, there's a quick cancel there by Puck. Backs off with this pylon. He's going to place it slightly further back here. I'm interested to see how much the upgrades really kick in here, because it's a 2-1 attack versus 0-0 on the range and armor there. We don't even have range upgrade for Hydras. So I have to wonder, well, we're about to find out, aren't we? Because here it goes, the time warp behind that as well, and the big engagement on the front with the Zealots running right into the Roaches, and of course getting hit really hard by the Hydras at the back there, but the Archons really didn't get a chance to get involved in that fight.
Yeah, the Archons didn't engage. The upgrades were good, the force fields were good. We saw the efficiency of the Zealots against the units they could attack. There's just not enough stuff. The problem with getting those upgrades early on, you're sacrificing a ton of resources that could go into army or infrastructure. We saw how much it slowed down the attack and just how tiny the army is compared to Ghostwser's. And to Ghostwser's credit, he responded to this perfectly. He didn't overdrone at all. He committed everything to getting to Roaches and Hydras very quickly, which is smart against Ghostwser because you really need, or against Puck, because you really need those Hydras to hold off a lot of these high-tech all-in builds that Puck prefers. So Ghostwser played this perfectly, but really just kind of, it was really a cheesy build. Puck was hoping that he would catch Ghostwser off guard, and he didn't really. Ghostwser just had a big army and won that easily. But Ghostwser here is actually pushing in pretty aggressively, and if he's not careful, he could end up losing that army, but it's looking like he's going to be able to push on through.
Puck throwing the Militia Core away there with no energy. That is to be expected. More Force Fields going down. Force Field play here by Puck's been pretty good, but he is still fighting against a much, much larger army. The Archons are finally able to really get into the mix, but one of them is, and there goes the second one. In fact, the army just crumbles under the firepower there as +1 completes, range completes for the Hydras, and there's the GG, and that was a pretty rapid game there.
Yeah, definitely. That was just a designed build from Puck, and it didn't end up working out. But again, it is Star Station. This has to be one of the maps. Maybe this and Planet S are probably going to be Zerg's 2 favorite maps out of the ladder pool. And so getting this out of the way, just doing a silly build that doesn't really say anything about how else you're going to play. He didn't give his opponent any information. He obviously gave up a 0-1 map score and a little bit of confidence, but it's about the best you can do with one of your disadvantage maps. So it's not the end of the world. It's just going to be a matter of how well Puck can actually transition from that into the next games.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, really. Getting into this situation where it's just this weird build that we haven't really seen before. 9-gate Chargelet, Archon, what? I mean, I don't even know what was going on there, honestly. But it was so weird to see, but it's hard to really tell what kind of form Puck is in after that. I think that you can read into maybe how badly the initial engagement went. The Archon's kind of in the wrong position, not really able to actually hit anything, and then getting into a situation where your army just melted against a far superior force. Even if you had those upgrades, it didn't really seem to make that much of a difference. But again, you're totally right. It clearly was not the kind of map that Puck was looking for. Now Puck's actually picked up Belshir Vestige for the second game.
Yeah, that's much more comfortable map for Protoss. There's tons of tiny little choke areas and ramps and high grounds that can be controlled with Colossus play. Just a much better map for Protoss in general. Also, the third base is it's a pretty long rush distance from your opponent to your third base. It's very backset, very controllable. just a much better defensive map in general. So Protoss does have the option of going into that macro game, but Puck does love 2-base all-ins. But the fact that the third base is a viable option, that means that Zerg has to play differently than they can on a map like Star Station. With a third base ad exposed, Ghost2User is safe to just make 60, 70 drones and then go straight into mass unit production like we saw last game, because if Puck actually does try and take that third, then those units that could be defensive can also become aggressive. But on a map like this, where the third base is so defensible, if you cut drones early on and then make a ton of units, there's a pretty good chance that if Protoss plays defensive and takes that third base, they're going to be able to hold your attack just fine and then end up way ahead in the economy. So this game, Ghost2User has to either make a guess or he has to play much more carefully than he did last game. And if he takes that guess and guesses wrong, then he could lose because of it. So Ghost2User is not going to be able to hard counter as much this game. So Puck, whether he ends up going with a 2-base or the 3-base play, either option is much more powerful and scary for Ghost2User.
All right, well, we'll find out after this break, folks. You're watching ShoutCraft America. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, Game 2 of Puck versus Ghost2User on Belshire Vestige. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to ShoutCraft America. Game 2 is on its way. Belshire Vestige will be the venue for this particular matchup, with Ghost2User leading 1-0 in this best-of-5 series. Alright, these guys looking about ready to get started. And then we can get right into it. Now, I'm hoping to see a little bit more of a straight-up game, honestly, here from Puck, because that build was odd and didn't really do much.
You honestly might be kind of out of luck. That's the kind of build that Puck absolutely loves, PvZ. Totally capable of a macro game and of doing it quite well, but definitely prefers those really designed, prepared, kind of very tech-heavy 2-base builds. And that's why I was saying before the cast that if Ghost2User has studied Puck and knows what to expect, this could definitely go in his favor, because Puck is very, very stylistic. And also that style is various all-ins, but almost always tech-heavy all-ins, which means that Ghost2User doesn't really have to worry too much about Warp Gate all-ins, any kind of +1 Zealot attack, anything like that. Not so likely to see that, but Void Ray-based all-ins, Immortal-based all-ins, Colossus-based all-ins, anything that comes later in the game is definitely scary, and Ghost2User just needs to make sure that he times his macro well, and he can't hold off anything like that. So, and then that puts the onus on Puck to actually mix things up and catch Ghost2User off guard if it turns out that he is too well prepared for his style.
Alright, well, here we are on Belshire Vestige, and to the southeast position, in the Red Trunks playing Protoss, we have ROOTPuck versus his opponent to the northwest position in the Blue Trunks, playing Zerg, currently up 1 game in this best-of-5 series. It is Millenium Goswser. Now, we'll see what comes out of these guys in the next couple of minutes, but I'd like your opinion on something. The build that we saw last game, would you say that that was a blind counter to an expected style and ended up being kind of a coin flip, I suppose?
Kind of, but as I was saying when I was discussing the third base on here, what happens on Star Station is that you can kind of just make a bunch of units as Zerg, and if Protoss tries to take their third, then that third is so exposed that you can go attack them and kill it. Whereas on a map like this, that third base is not so exposed. You can't kill it so easily. So all Ghost2User really had to do last game was make a bunch of units, and then either use them to defend, or if a third base goes down, go and try and attack. And that's the biggest problem with that map for Protoss users. That's why Protoss users don't like it too much. But on this map, then he actually has to make the choice between being aggressive and defensive. So that was really just kind of an uncomfortable map. Puck chose a pretty cheesy build that might have worked out if Ghost2User had gone for a different composition or tried to be more greedy or something like that. But really just an uncomfortable map, and Ghost2User played it smartly.
Alright, well, we saw a little bit of hatchery denial there from Puck. Nice little bit of control just to delay that hatchery a little while. And he actually responds with his own Nexus first play here.
Yeah, Nexus first, and actually the safe version of Nexus first, you did get the Forge before the second pylon. Sometimes Puck likes to be really, really greedy, get 2 pylons before starting up any kind of tech buildings. Might be worried about a 14 pool or something like that, as any Zerg who plays him on the ladder knows all of his tendencies, just because, you know, everyone plays a lot of games together. That's actually a really interesting part of this tournament, since these are all North American players. Even, well, Ghost2User's based in France, but he still plays the North American ladder quite a bit.
Yeah.
Everyone has a ton of experience against each other and knows everyone's little quirks and flaws and tendencies. And we kind of see that here. Ghost2User getting that very early gas before his actually taking his third base. That could be something that he has planned out specifically to counter Puck, because that is a pretty weird thing. It is possible he's going for the quick 1-1 Ling, like the quick double upgrade Lings into very fast Ultra style that we've been seeing a little bit recently. But it could also be something that he has prepped specifically to deal with Puck's playstyle.
Yeah, and the point that you brought up was absolutely fantastic, in the fact that these guys have played so much together is sort of a blessing and a curse, I tend to find, because there are certain expectations that come of playing any of these guys that you run into on ladder, and then suddenly in a best of 5, things can change, especially since Goswser and Puck have known who they've been playing against in the round of 8 for at least the past week. And I believe Goswser, I don't think he's played his challenger match yet in WCS, has he?
I'm not entirely sure. I know that Puck has. Puck played against. Was it Neeb? Actually, no. Puck was supposed to play against me, so I got a walkover, and he's going to play against Neeb next.
Okay.
I don't believe they've played yet.
Yeah, so as a direct result, these guys have really had like the past week just to think about this series, because the money does go up significantly after this. They're already at $350 plus whatever tips they get. They get to the round of 4, that increases a rather large amount, so it's definitely worth preparing for this best of 5 series. And a lot of these guys think to themselves, well, you know what, this is a tournament I can very much win. I don't have to worry about the possibility that I get to the round of 16 then run into a Korean that's just going to stomp my face in. This is something that is very even. This is something that, where you just have a lineup of players that are equally matched.
Yeah, and something really interesting and important just happened. Goswser actually took the second gas at his natural, and Puck was about to scout that, but the Queen actually blocked it and did not get vision of that, so Puck doesn't know that that's happening. In those early 2 gases, we see the 2 Evo chambers coming down, so it is going to be that quick 1-1 build, but Puck does not know that it's coming yet. All Puck knows is that there's no third base, or there was no third base just yet for Goswser. So really important little denial of information from Goswser there.
Very, very nice pickup. And in the meantime, we do have the Stargate play behind this, one of the potential options here. And we'll see what he decides to do with it. I would expect either a Void Ray or a Phoenix, and there's the Void Ray coming down. Be very, very odd indeed to see an Oracle thrown into play at this particular stage of the game. And Link's starting to make their way out. Goswser's going to check and see if there's a third base, which of course he won't find. He's not going to be able to make a run at this natural.
No, definitely not. Just poking around, trying to get some kind of map control, make sure that there's no third base there. But really just map control, keeping Puck in the dark as much as possible. And Puck probably going to open up with, yeah, it's the Void Ray, and then actually a fast Robo. This is a build we actually played on ladder the other day, and Puck did this build to me and told me it was a build he had prepared specifically for our WCS match. It's going to be a Void Ray first into a very quick Colossus all-in.
Well,
Zergling's actually getting the main.
Yeah, that shouldn't have happened at all, and that's just scouted everything down. Goswser manages to slip in there and says, all right, cool, you got a Void Ray, you got this, you got that. Even actually going to attack the pylon there, shouldn't get it. The Void Ray should be able to pick that off, but yeah, that was a bit of a critical mistake there by Puck, not really paying attention. The sentries just sat there not really doing anything, and as a direct result, this build has been fully scouted. The response is coming in the form of a Baneling Nest and Infestation Pit coming down here.
Yeah, did he actually... I don't believe he actually saw the Robo Bay, so he may still think it's just going to be an Immortal all-in.
Okay.
So the Colossus could catch it. The Colossus could catch him off guard.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, the Robo Bay was there. He did run past it, but it depends on the timing of it. Yes, he actually did miss that. There's an Overlord sitting about an inch to the north of it that isn't seeing it right now. I have to wonder if it'll spot it when the actual thing completes, but it looks like the Void Rays are heading in that direction anyway, so that's not going to be a factor unless those Void Rays end up attacking the Overlord and sending it in the wrong direction. But no, it is not going to see that. So, yeah, absolutely right. He may very well have misread this.
Yeah, and we don't see Interspire coming, so definitely not going to be Corruptors have to deal with that. And so that means that Goswser is just going to have to actually overwhelm the Colossus army, catch it out of position, catch it when there are no force fields up, and actually just overwhelm it really inefficiently, because Colossus against Zerglings is obviously not a good trade for the Zerglings.
Indeed not.
But a Goswser should have 2-2. He's actually not upgrading 2-2, and that's actually a really big problem, because the 2-2 upgrade is when the Zerglings actually get incredibly powerful. They absolutely melt any unupgraded Protoss ground army. And I'm not sure if that's a conscious decision from Goswser, if he's rushing up to Hive to unlock some kind of tech that he feels comfortable with against Colossus. He may be going for very quick Vipers to pull the Colossus out of the composition, surround it with Zerglings, and kill it like that. but he's just now starting 2-2 upgrades, and I think he would save gas if you were going for that. So the late 2-2 upgrades may be a mistake, and if so, that's going to be a very costly one, because those Zerglings aren't going to be half as efficient against this army we have coming out from Puck.
Yeah, it also means that if he does end up going for it, which he is now, the Ultra Cavern going down here and the Ling Ultra style, then the 3-3 and, as a result, the 5-3 upgraded Ultralisks will be a lot later. There's also some weird, funky stuff going on. Ghostwser built one Swarm Host.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. That's something you see every once in a while, ZVT, to try and draw mine hits, but ZVP, maybe scouting, maybe base harassment, I'm not entirely sure. We'll just have to see how you use it. Also interesting, I was kind of wrong earlier. Puck did actually put down that third Nexus, not going for an all-in. And this is smart against the 1-1 Zergling style. If we look at Ghostwser's third base, he has 15 drones actually mining there, and he's just now taking it. He doesn't have much of an economy. And most Protosses, when they see this style, they try and attack before the Ultras come out. But the smart way to play it is to sit back like Puck is doing here. And this probably was a planned 2-base all-in. Puck just sitting back, recognizing the situation, going to go for that big, heavy army that counters Ultralisks, lots of Immortals and Zealots and Archons, hopefully. And because... Actually, no. Here comes the army.
Yep, he's rolling in that general direction right now. The Colossus count is currently at 2. We had another Ling run by and a successful save on the third base in the meantime for Puck. And now he's just going to work on this third, and... I don't know. I don't think, really, Ghostwser can actually engage this. He's going to lose this third, I would think.
Yeah, but as soon as the Ultras come out, that army is dead. The one thing that's really going well for Puck here is that he actually has a Warp Prism in the main as well. Zealots taking down the Queen, forcing a pull on the drones. But a big army coming in here. The Ultras just pop. They melt all the force fields, and they're just killing everything, really.
Yeah, there's a murder fest going on over here, and with that massive amount of Queen support, sitting on 7 Queens with the Transfusers, we suddenly get into this annoying position where Ultralisks refuse to die, and now they've got their mitts on the Colossus. He's able to control, but it doesn't make a difference. They're just smashing their way through the Stalkers, trying to get to the Colossus. Parts flying everywhere. It's ugly, but as you said, that Warp Prism harassment did do a reasonable amount, looking at 13 workers killed there for Puck, and of course the third base denied. But what happens when Ghostwser decides just to turn around and say, you know what, I've got Ultralisks, you can't match that. I've got 6 of them, in fact, and I'm just going to come down on you.
Yeah, Puck did manage to take out all of the Zerglings before he actually lost his army, and if he'd had a Mothership Core with attack, as he really, really should have, that would have been absolutely great, because he could just recall out as soon as he killed the third.
Yeah.
Fortunately, he didn't, so he gave away all of those units, and with a third base, he has a little bit more production than you normally expect, but it can't be very high probe count third base, just because he invested so much in that attack. And without that army, like you said, those 6 Ultras are just never going to die. Doesn't even have the Queens coming. He's just going to use the Queens to defend against any potential harass. Not going to bother trying to walk them across the map. But that Ultra Ling is going to be very, very hard for Puck to actually hold that off.
Yeah, starting to work on 3-3 now as well. Puck definitely does not have the means to deal with those Ultralisks. Those Zealots will tickle and nothing but. And just going to go for the third base right now and most likely smash it down. There is a Void Ray and an Immortal in this mix, which will help a little bit, but those probes are going to die, and that Nexus is immediately going to melt. Engagement comes in, and Puck's going to try his best to try and hold on to this, but Zealot pieces are just flying everywhere. This is just ugly to watch as Ghostwser rampages all over the third base of Puck, and Puck desperately trying to get those units out that he needs to deal with these Ultralisks, the Void Rays and the Immortals. And Ghostwser smartly, I believe now, deciding to back off, just saying, hey, let's get 3-3. Puck is not researching upgrades, actually just started his Twilight Council.
Yeah, that upgrade advantage says it all. There's just no way you can fight against that. We see all 6 Ultras retreating from that battle, some of them down to half health, and that's all Puck managed to do to them throughout that entire battle. And it's just going to continue like that. Puck doesn't have the economy to really afford to go Archons and Immortals and Zealots, and you really absolutely need all of those. You need the Archons to tank the damage from the Ultras. Everything else just ties to them immediately. You need the Immortals to deal the damage, and you need Zealots in there to help against the Zerglings as well. And he just can't afford that kind of composition on 2 base. And so in the time it's going to take him to set that up, Ghostwser going to be up to 4 base. He's adding air tech as well. If Broodlords come in, that'll be the end of the game. And just Ghostwser is just in total control of this. Losing that army to take out the third base just really was not worth it for Puck.
Oh, he's going to lose the Warp Prism here as well by the looks of it, so that's not going to be taking any more part in this particular game. And it's unfortunate because maybe that's a way to get back in if you can do a significant amount of economic damage. But as you said, the Templar Archives is now coming down to give him that Archon technology. But There's a big army now posturing to hit the third base and force yet another cancel. There is a nice little bit of SimCity going on here with the Warlofts, but the rocks are going to go down, which is going to open up a nice little pathway. 3-3 is about to complete. We don't have kindness plating, so they're not as tough as they could be, but more than tough enough to deal with what Puck's got, I feel.
Yeah. But you do have the first two Archons coming in. Puck is going for a pretty good composition here. You get those Void Rays, the Immortals, the Archons. Those are all the units you'd want. The problem is he has half as many as he'd like to because he wasn't running out third base for most of the game. And now we see the Queens coming across the map to join in as well. Some Corruptors to help shoot down the Void Rays. And more SimCity coming from Puck, more pylon walls. And that's really, really smart to do. That's something a lot of Protoss neglect. Those building walls just absolutely mess up the Ultra's pathing. And that can actually make a gigantic difference in the fight, but this is just such an overwhelming advantage for Goswser.
Yeah, we're seeing a huge amount of transfusing going on. Not quite enough, but considering the amount of Immortals and the amount of Void Rays in the mix here. Goswser taking definitely a very inefficient engagement. He's going to be losing all of those Ultralisks as well. Goswser, of course, does have the economic advantage and can rebuild that, but that was still a painful loss, I feel.
Yeah, that one actually, I can't believe how well that went given the upgrade differential. Obviously, those are incredibly efficient units from Puck. Like I said, that's exactly the composition that you want against Ultras, and the pylon wall helped immensely as well. But just with that many transfuses and that upgrade differential, I can't believe how well that went. He killed 7, 8 Ultras, all the Queens, all the Corruptors, and definitely not an advantage for Puck. That late third base is just so detrimental, but he might not actually be able to hold. If Goswser loses this fourth base and Puck keeps a decent amount of that army alive, I'm going to say it's actually an advantage for Puck at this point. Those Vipers aren't going to help too much. He's getting in there before the Broodlords actually finish. But with a blinding cloud down and not too many Stalkers in the mix, the Broodlord should hold it off. But this has become a much more exciting game than it was before.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult for Puck to even try to push up this. As you can very clearly see, he is running up against so many nasty units and has also now lost his anti-air, which means the Broodlords will finish off what remains of this army. And it was certainly a brave defense, no question about that, but it's now 180 supply to 74. The upgrade advantage is now 3-3 to 1-1. Blink Stalker now begins. These pylons will not stand up against that, and this is most likely going to be the end of it. The Archon doesn't even get into the mix. Lings now flood their way into the third base, make their way into the Stalkers, and that is it. Goswser takes a second game in convincing fashion.
Yeah, I thought Puck might have a chance with that big Ultra attack, but I just kind of jumped the gun with the counterattack, and that proved to be too much.
Yes, yeah, it did. And with the Broodlords popping out, it's like you can't stick around and fight for an extended period of time if Broodlords are there, because they're just going to be whittling your health down, and you can't do anything to them because you can't get your hands on them, especially without Blink Stalker, without a large number of Void Rays to actually eliminate that, or of course without Phoenixes. Yeah, that was difficult. That was really difficult. But Goswser is playing pretty dominant Zerg versus Protoss right now.
Yeah, he definitely is. It's looking like he's just kind of ready for everything. He's making all the right decisions, and he's taking control of the game, too. He's not letting Puck dictate what happens, which is really important against a build order-based player like that. Like, if you let the game play out as Puck has planned it, and you do the things that are predictable and counterable, then that's right in his wheelhouse. But taking the game to him is the best way to deal with that kind of player.
Yeah, and we're going to have to see what kind of map choice will come out. It's going to be Akalon Wastes here by Puck for potentially Puck's final map of the tournament here.
Yeah, hopefully it's not a 3-0. I really thought the series would be closer than that, but it seems like Goswser is really well prepared for Puck's shenanigans.
Yeah, it seems like he is. Like, Goswser just doesn't really have a lot of holes in his player. Even losing that third base right there was actually more costly to Puck, in my opinion, just because, as you said, no Mothership Core, no recall. You lose your entire high-tech, expensive army to take out one base. It doesn't work, especially if you then leave yourself wide open to a counterattack there.
Yeah, especially not against that style. Like, the third base is obviously always important, but is almost kind of an all-in from the Zerg. Everything is about getting to those Ultras and killing an army. And so it's just attacking into him and losing the army like that is playing right to what he wants. I have no idea why there wasn't a Mothership Core with that. If there had been, I think Puck wins that game almost easily. Like, from that point on. Just recall out, set up your army, doesn't lose his third, has a very, very efficient, strong army against a low econ opponent.
Yeah, certainly.
Just the lack of the Mothership Core is inexcusable.
It's very, very odd, isn't it? And actually, I've got to say, I've seen quite a few Protoss just not build the Mothership Core after the early game. I think a lot of them seem to use it very much for early game defense and for a little bit of early game scouting. It's like, hey, I've got a phone on overcharge, this is great, right? But then we don't see that much in terms of the mid-game Mothership Core play and the recalls. That's something that Minigun really loves to do, but Puck, maybe not so much.
Yeah, I was just about to say, the other two Protosses we have coming up today are...
So much.
Yeah, I was just about to say, the other two Protosses we have coming up today are really big abusers of the recall timing pokes, where you just kind of attack at an odd timing where it's not really supposed to work, and a lot of the time you'll catch your opponent droning up at that time, because that's when it's normally comfortable to be greedy.
Yeah.
And even if you don't catch them being greedy, if they are prepared for it, then you just recall out at no cost to yourself. And Minigun and State both make great usage of that. And Puck, honestly, usually has a Mothership Core, usually plays very abusively and intelligently. It's maybe a case of nerves. It might just be a simple mistake. That does happen at times.
All right, well, Akalon Wastes is going to be the next map here. Puck versus Ghostwser, with Ghostwser leading 2-0. And let's see what Puck can break out here. It's going to have to be something a little bit better than that. And ooh, it's tough, man. I mean, Ghostwser is just playing really, really good StarCraft right now.
Yeah, and this map, I would normally say it's a pretty good map for Protoss, but it's not a good map for Puck's style. So even on here, he may not be particularly comfortable.
Oh, we'll find out, won't we? In the southeast position to try and stay in this tournament right now. Doesn't want to go out with a 3-0, doesn't want to go out at all. It is, of course, in the red trunks, playing Protoss ROOTPuck versus his opponent, who just looks unbeatable right now. In the blue trunks, playing Zerg to the northwest, Millenium-Goswser.
Yeah, like I said, Puck, this is a great map for economic defensive kind of Protoss because that third base is so easy and the fourth base is relatively easy to take. But Puck has shown a definite tendency, just overall style-wise, definite tendency towards two-base all-ins, and that has held true earlier on in this series. So hopefully he'll be willing to mix up his style and actually play to the map and take advantage of that. But if he tries another two-base all-in, I see Ghostwser just winning easily 3-0.
Yeah, and that would not be the best series to watch, quite frankly. I'm hoping that we see a little bit of a different style coming out here from Puck. Ghostwser, on the other hand, can just kind of keep trucking along and playing reactively, trying to get the scouting. And Ghostwser got fantastic scouting in the previous game. It wasn't really Ghostwser scouting well, it was Puck's not denying it. Allowing Lings in not once but twice through the wall it's not really what you expect from a player of that caliber. And while Ghostwser did miss the Robo, it didn't actually really factor into it at all. By the time that push came in, the Colossus had been scouted, Ultras were out, and that, as they say, was that. Puck is now going to be going for a Nexus before Forge play.
Yep, sticking consistent with that, not trying to do any kind of gateway first. And I think that might actually be a little bit smart from him, because Ghostwser has been playing very comfortably early on. It definitely seems like he knows that Puck is much more towards the tech-based two-base all-ins. And tech-based two-base all-ins, obviously, if you're investing in a double Forge or Stargate and a Robo or something early on, you're not going to be doing any kind of light pressure or any kind of attack. So I think it would really benefit Puck if he does insist on being aggressive. I think it would have benefited him to do a gateway expansion into a gateway timing or something like that. But it seems like just sticking with what he knows thus far.
Yeah, Puck with the double pylon block and actually allowing the pylon and the natural to complete there. He really, really does not want Ghostwser to expand right now.
Yeah, but we do see pretty early pool finish and 4 Zerglings on the way. Forge has not completed yet, but I would be pretty surprised. I think he's just going to use these Zerglings to clear it out, put down 2 hatcheries at once. It's too much of a gamble to actually go to the Protoss' base and risk not getting an expansion up because you can't clear the pylons.
There we go. And finally a hatch goes down. Puck actually did a pretty damn good job of denying it the third there after the pylon cancel.
Yeah, this is something that Puck does quite frequently. I'm not really sure what makes him do it because he often follows it out the same as if it had not happened. So I'm not really sure what triggers that. It may just be a tactic he mixes in every once in a while, but just goes very committed to the hatchery blocks, just denies as much economy as possible. Sometimes even to the extent of putting down a gateway or a cyber core next to the pylon and the natural to delay that even more. Just definitely something he likes to do. And as a Zerg player, I know every Zerg just absolutely hates that.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. It slows your economy down so much. You're sitting there with 600-700 minerals banked up in the early game, and there's just nothing you can really do about it. It's just incredibly frustrating, and I think really smart for the Protoss player to do.
Yeah, and even if it doesn't really give you this huge advantage, it gives you the kind of the mental edge. And even as a low-level player, I find if like my SCV gets killed or something like that by a drone or whatever, I actually feel like just leaving the game right then and there, because I'm just like, this is not a good start. I'm not in a good mental state. I just need to quit this and try again.
Yeah, it's incredibly demoralizing. Like, even like you said, beyond the actual concrete impact it has on the game, it's not going to cost you the game to have something like that happen early on. But it's just so frustrating and so uncomfortable to know that you could have started much more efficiently, and it can be really, really annoying. But Ghost is up with a 2-0 lead, probably in a pretty good mental place right now, and we see a very quick double gas coming down from him right at 36 supply. So that's earlier than usual. That could be a quick speed link, could be quick upgrades, maybe fast lair into Muta, but definitely something to look out for, not entirely normal.
Certainly. And on the other side of things, we do have Puck taking all 4 gas as well.
Yeah, that is pretty common out of Puck. Often indicative. Well, it used to be indicative of 2 or 3 Void Rays into a Void Ray and Immortal all-in. That was kind of his go-to build. I've mentioned it before. Go-to build earlier on in HOTS. However, he's clearly diversified quite a bit, doing the Colossus build the other game, as well as that double Forge. We do see the Stargate and the Robo come down, so I do believe it will be either the Void Ray into Immortal or another Void Ray into Colossus all-in. Just have to wait and see if we're going to get that Robo Bay or not.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see how that one goes. It certainly didn't work out that well the last time. Ghost in the meantime, is building a Roach Warren. Lair is coming up. And it's not a fast lair, but it's definitely not a slow one either.
Yeah, for 3 bases, that's quite quick. And a Roach Warren and no Evo chambers, so this is actually looking pretty weird. And we do see an Overlord Scout coming into Puck's base. Saw the Stargate, believe it did not see the Robo. So definitely no Stargates coming. And this response to that should be putting down a Hydra Den, and I imagine this might end up looking a lot like that first game did. Just a very low econ, not particularly well developed, no Evo chambers, not much creep spread, but just a big mass of Roach Hydra early on. And that's going to shut down any kind of 2-base all-in. But it's not very... We do see the first Evo chamber coming down. But it's not a very sustainable thing. Not a ton of drones, not a ton of gas, no 4th hatchery. Just not much behind it. And on this map, Puck can actually just choose to go down and take that 3rd base, and that looks like that's what's going to be happening as he's taking down those rocks, he's sending down a probe. So Puck's just going to be turtling up on 3 bases. Those users going for very fast roach speed and a Hydra Den coming down. So this could be very good for Puck. This is looking like he might be able to just defend on 3 bases, and Ghost User's not going to have a ton of late game sustainability.
Now, Puck actually went for an Oracle, which is an odd choice in my honest opinion. What do you make of that? Obviously following it up with a Void Ray here, but going for a single Oracle towards the 3rd, this could actually do quite a bit by the looks of it.
Yeah, it's very strange. Oracle is something not a lot of players really prepare for just because it's not the best build. If there's a Spore Crawler in every mineral line, that Oracle is almost a wasted investment.
Yeah.
And that actually gives it a little bit of power because no one expects it. No one prepares for it. And we see he's now hitting a naked mineral line. 1 Oracle can beat 1 Queen if he wants to do that, or he can just pick off all of these drones. And we see a ton of drone kills coming down for him.
Yeah, looking nice. I mean, 8 kills already. That's totally worthwhile. He can back off with the Oracle, never really have to worry about it. And Spore Crawlers would really have to come down here from Gosu User, because that Oracle, once it recharges its energy and its shields, can be right back in there doing the same damn thing again.
Yep, and we do see a Spore Crawler coming down. Also, Hydra's out. But as I was saying, this is really just, if we look at the worker count, it's only 64 drones. And going into a macro game, when your opponent already has a 3rd Nexus completed, you want more drones than that. You want more hatcheries, you want more expansions. Ghost User is just, he's building for a big army. He's building a bunch of Roach Hydra, but also trying to replace those drones at the same time. So I'm not sure how well. Yeah, and an Infestation Pit coming up. So it's looking like Ghost User is kind of torn between preparing for the late game and actually trying to go for an attack, and he's really wasting any opportunity he had to try and punish this 3rd base. So right now they're sitting on equal income, which is not where Zerg wants to be. Robo Bay is coming up, so he's going to have Colossus out to deal with those Hydras quite quickly. Honestly, this is looking by far the best Puck has in this series so far. He definitely has an advantage in this game so far.
Yeah, certainly. The Nexus is absolutely fantastic, and just a nice little trick. I like it when I see a player just throw something that's not a huge investment, but something that's a little bit of a curveball at their opponent, and just try and keep the opponent honest. If a Zerg player wants to sit there just droning and doesn't want to build Spore Crawlers, then if you can somehow punish that, then that's a great way to play.
Yeah, that Oracle more than paid for itself. It definitely turned out to be a great choice just because Ghost User wasn't ready for it. And that's really the most you can hope for from an Oracle. It's not going to be a game changer like a Void Ray or something. It is definitely a harass unit, and it did its harassment. And it's still there keeping him honest, like you said, putting up those spore crawlers, forcing him to be a little bit more careful.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see whether or not he decides to use it for Revelation later on in the game. We are seeing an increased use of it. I'd still say the Oracle's not that much of a popular unit. There was a lot of hype going into Heart of the Swarm regarding the Oracle, especially in the beta, saying, Oracle's such an amazing unit, good lord, look at what it can do to mineral lines. Then suddenly people stopped building it because, well, people figured out how to deal with it. It's not really that difficult, but now we are seeing Revelation being used as an incredibly powerful tool to figure out exactly where your opponent's army is at any given time and give you that full awareness.
Yeah, I think as we see more and more games going towards late game, Revelation is going to get more and more powerful. We'll see kind of a second coming of the Oracle as they discover its other uses, because the combination of Tempest plus Revelation is just kind of ridiculous. You get vision of all their units, and you can shoot them from across the map. There's really good synergy between those two units. So as soon as people start getting more Tempest-based compositions, I think we definitely start seeing the Oracle as more of a support caster rather than just a harassment unit.
Now, composition-wise, we're seeing these guys build up towards max armies, and neither of them seem all that willing to go for each other. There, in fact, goes the Revelation, and the Oracle actually gets out of there, so that's a nice little piece of information there. So Ghostwser has gone for Roach Hydralisk, and is combining some Corruptors and a few Vipers into the composition as well. He is up against Gateway Void Ray Colossus, and upgrade count-wise, we are looking for currently a slight advantage for the Protoss player, although that will be cancelled out momentarily by the upgrades here from Ghostwser, who is now also putting down a Great Aspire. So if you were to look at both of these compositions, who would you say would have the edge if they were to both go into 200-200?
A lot of it's going to come down to control and how well Ghostwser can actually trade out his ground army for Broodlords and Corruptors. Because those Zerglings, those Roaches, not going to do too much in max composition, particularly with that many Colossus and Void Rays out. And if they actually engage here, everything's going to come down to the Vipers. If he can get really good pulls on all the Colossus, then that'll be GG and Ghostwser wins. But if he can protect those Colossus, then ground army versus ground army, Puck wins for sure right now.
Alright, well, the fourth base looks like it's going to be cancelled there. I think it was... I don't imagine Puck was actually expecting that to go up anytime soon, but it's cancelled now, and that gives Puck a little bit of time to continue to prepare. He's currently not maxed out. Big Zealot Warping comes in. Storm is being added on, but it's not here yet. There is an upgrade advantage for his opponent, but a lot of lanes just running past there, and it looks like Ghostwser just wants to get rid of the lanes and swap them out for something useful like 6 Broodlords.
Yeah, very fast Broodlords, and the thing is, the Tempests are now out, so those Vipers aren't as useful as they were. They can be feedbacked as long as Puck keeps those Colossus a little bit back out of abduct range. But there's no... I don't know, this is really... The Broodlords are kind of an odd choice, because there's already 6 or 7 Void Rays in that army composition, and Void Rays just shoot down Broodlords immediately, any armored unit immediately. So as long as he... Everything, like I said, is going to come down to control, but Puck more than has enough tools and options to actually beat this army. He just needs to make sure he feedbacks those Vipers and then gets the Void Rays on the Broodlords.
Alright, well, Broodlords engaged, take out a sentry, always nice to see. Also trying to nibble away at that High Templar. It would be wonderful if he took that out, but that didn't happen. So the Broodlord's effectiveness is, of course, a little bit limited, especially considering the number of Colossus there to try and kill that. But here we go, the engagement's coming in. Storm comes below the Broodlords, but the Blinding Cloud forces Puck all the way back with continued bombardment from the Broodlords at the back as well. Now Puck backs up and attempts to engage. Viper's now moving in as well. Ghostwser not exactly getting optimal engagement arcs right here with the Storm going down. A Colossus falls, but the Void Rays are smashing their way through this army right now. The Colossi at the back of there, I have no idea what happened to the Vipers, but they did not contribute that much to this fight at all. And Ghostwser's army is melting here.
Yeah, Puck did that perfectly. He feedbacked all of the Vipers. He backed away from the one Blinding Cloud that came down, and then just targeting down the Broodlords with the Void Rays. And just, like I said, Ghostwser, kind of decent army, but Puck had all the tools to beat it and did it perfectly. That was all it really took. Not a sustainable kind of playstyle from Ghostwser at all. He was really focused on that big attack. And now, after that battle, Puck is just going to attack move for the win from here, I think.
Well, we've got Ghostwser maxing out again, but of course he did it on Roaches, and he does have a few Vipers out again, but he's not going to get enough time to really build the energy on them, so I have to wonder just how effective that's really going to be, especially now that the upgrades are looking a little bit healthier for Puck with the shield upgrade and the +2, plus the air weapons. And here we go once again. Force fields go down a big bombardment line here from the Hydralisks, does significant damage to the Stalkers, and this might not be a win for Puck as of yet, but he's certainly piling on the pressure.
Yeah, Ghost User with the Remax on Roach Hydraling, and Puck actually pushing it anyway. Roach Hydraling, obviously low tech, low resources, and a big abducts actually get both the Colossus out. He manages to recall the big chunk of his army home, but losing both those Colossus kind of that hurts him quite a bit. He's the fourth base coming down, and this is a low tech army from Ghost User, but those Colossus are very, very important. He has to be pretty careful not to die here.
Yeah, this is going to be messy as well. There is not enough energy for Storm. He could feed back the Vipers, but they're not even in play right now. And we are seeing Roach Hydra versus Stalker and Void Ray here. Looking decent enough for Puck. Puck's going to definitely take some losses here, though. There's no real question about that. And there's more Hydralisks coming in as well. A single Colossus is able to contribute quite nicely from the cliff face there. There's the defense from Puck. Currently, efficiency-wise, Ghost User has definitely lost more, although Puck has lost more gas-heavy units here, as Puck tends to clear out just a little bit of the creep and give himself some options to pivot towards the 5th base of Ghost User down to the bottom there. That could very easily be killed off.
Yeah, it looked a little bit iffy there for a while because Puck was pushing into Roach Hydraling, and against Roach Hydraling you want to play much more passively. It's very good until those high-tech units come out, but even that battle win for Ghost User getting the Colossus is not going to be enough. This Protoss army is just so strong, and really smart play with the recalls. You know, we were questioning Puck's lack of use of the recall last game, but definitely putting it to use here, keeping that army alive. And as long as Ghost User is stuck on this kind of Roach Hydraling composition, there's a ticking clock on that because the Colossus, the Templar, the Void Race are just so efficient against it.
Great abduct here from Ghost User, able to pull the Colossus into a good position there. Looking to try and see some Storm, but there's actually no energy for it. Another Colossus goes down here as well. And things are still looking a little bit dicey here for Puck. Ghost User is maxing out again. Blinkstalker play now in effect, trying to bring units onto the field. We've got +3 ground weapons started, 12 more Roaches on the way, +3 missile attacks started for Ghost User. And looking for Zealot charge here as well. We might see a transition out to Zealot Archon. That Blinding Cloud, super effective. Puck not quick enough getting out of that, taking significant losses here. And Ghost User continues to menace the front. Now, you are absolutely right in saying that this is very much a ticking clock, but Puck's stuck on mostly gateway units right now and isn't able to get a good Colossus count up.
Yeah, the Colossus and the lack of Templar is really big. Every time he warps in some Templar, they die before they actually manage to get Storms off. And so as much as I was complimenting Puck's army management in that first engagement, it's been pretty questionable ever since. Still going to win this battle, still on 4-base Protoss, which is pretty scary, but he really needs to be much more careful about protecting those high-tech investments. Because gateway units against Roach Hydra, that's not what you want. And Ghost User with really smart Roach Hydra engagements thus far, good Viper usage for the most part, and not the most efficient style, but he's making it work. And a big part of that, honestly, is just because Puck is not keeping those important units alive. You really just need that big count of Void Rays and Colossus and Templar, and then this army will absolutely melt from Ghost User. He just has to be more patient and actually get that up and stop throwing away the important units.
Puck's managed to get a 5th base down to the bottom, which looks like it's just going to be, for the most part, a gas mining base. I'm actually kind of surprised that we're not seeing a second Robo or a second Stargate come down here from Puck. And it's really limiting his ability to get those very important units back out, and that is going to involve a reliance on Templar as a result. Storm goes down. Now at least he has Storms in his engagement, although he is caught out in a fairly ugly position. Now he's going to be backed off into a corner. Another Storm goes down here as well. Only a single Colossus in effect. Yet more Storms. There's the Abduct that comes down. The majority of Ghost User's army is getting melted here, and this is starting to look pretty good for Puck, although mutually assured destruction in effect, as these guys just tear into each other.
Yeah, once again, Puck caught out without the big high-tech army, just out of position. The really good engagement by Ghost User to actually push him back into that corner. But then some good Storms changing the situation again for Puck, actually giving him a bit of advantage. And just like you said, both killing off each other's armies. Not the best engagement, but Puck securing that 5th base, securing more gas, although actually evacuating all the probes from it. I guess he feels it's going to die for sure, so it's not even worth trying to defend. I don't know, very, very weird decision making from both of them here, but I think Ghost User is slowly gaining advantage as Puck's bases are starting to mine out, starting to run out of gas, and that's going to get pretty dangerous here if he can't continue to support the Colossus and the Templar production. But we do have 2 Robo Colossus out now, and that could be pretty powerful. But at the same time, Broodlord switch from Ghost User. I'm not sure if he scouted that or just kind of lucky or good star sense, but perfect timing on those Broodlords as he switches to more Colossus production. No Void Rays at all coming out now. Those Broodlords could actually be the game changer here for Ghost User.
Yeah, things are looking really, really good for him right now. I'm intrigued to see whether or not Puck can actually strike at a time or just get an efficient engagement that involves those Broodlords not really contributing that much. There's still the possibility that those Blink Stalkers will deal with the Broodlords, but unless you can get back there, and even if you just blink forward, it means that your Stalkers are ridiculously vulnerable as they try and deal with the Broodlords as well. So Puck has to get a smart engagement here. Ghostwser is menacing once again. He's maxed out yet again. We see that all the time. Ghostwser throwing away army after army, but able to remax on roaches that are heavily upgraded. And now Ghostwser going, just pushing forward a little bit. There's the blink that I was talking about, but that puts those right at the front. He takes the Broodlords out quite quickly here. The Colossus is looking pretty good, but they're all pulled in to that composition thanks to the Vipers. More storms going down here. A Time Warp goes down as well, but Puck should be able to hold this. There's a lot of very, very weak roaches that are suddenly going to get slaughtered by those Blink Stalkers.
Yeah, another honestly pretty sloppy engagement from both sides. Those Broodlords a little bit too exposed at the start. A good blink in from Puck to pick those off. But then the Colossus left undefended. No Templar feedbacks, which are an absolute must. And Puck ends up clearing it up with big warp-ins. But both players honestly playing really sloppy with their important units. And just need to be a lot more careful about that. Ghostwser is winning the battle of attrition. He is gaining more and more bases. Puck is kind of losing economy. But Ghostwser can only make maxed armies so many times, and he is losing a maxed army pretty much every time. But if we look at the supplies, it's now 196 to 134. This may have been the tipping point. Puck just cannot resupply as fast as Ghostwser. Ghostwser looks like he's probably going to manage to pull it out here.
Yeah, it looks like it. There's two Colossus in this army here. He's going to try and hold it. It's a good engagement point, I feel. Nice choke point that he can make use of here. There's an attempted flank, and actually we need to see better target fire here from Puck. He's got one Colossus firing on a single roach, which is absolutely wasteful here. He must target well in order to actually hold on to this base. More Stalkers are dying. Blink Stalker control is looking pretty good. The Hydra's now moving. Take out one Colossus. Yet more Stalkers falling here. Ghostwser is falling up again. Yet more big surges of units. 20, 30 roaches and 10 Hydras at once. His bank is monstrous right now as Puck has not really been able to touch his bases for the entire game. And now I feel that Puck is just in a horrible spot.
Yeah, Ghostwser realizing that he has Puck on the back foot, reinforcing purely low-tech units, just going to keep throwing masses at him and overwhelm him before he manages to get that 5th base up. Because that 5th base is what would let Puck continue to produce the high-tech units. But if he manages to deny that, that's going to be the end of the game. And this looks like that's going to happen here. Puck knowing that he's on the back foot, knowing that he has to do something to control Ghostwser's economy, but just not able to do it. Now losing all his units. And this should be the end of it for Puck. There's almost no way he's going to be able to clear this out.
No, there definitely isn't. He's only got one Colossus, and the second one pops out. It's not going to make any difference, and Puck apologizes to the fans for the 3-0 defeat there, and I don't think all that many people would unfortunately disagree with Puck's assessment of this game. But there you go. Great commiserations coming out here from Puck. Congratulations to his opponent. And GG, that is a 3-0 sweep for Ghostwser, who will advance through to the round of 4. Kind of cruising through that one, I feel. And Puck definitely did seem a bit shakier than usual. Yeah,
the first 2 games were just kind of overall not particularly good. Weird builds, bad decision making. But that 3rd game, that's the really depressing one, because Puck certainly could have, should have, would have won that. After that first engagement, just controlling everything perfectly, taking the Vipers out of the equation, backing away from the Binding Cloud, and just winning the battle very easily. But then getting a little bit too trigger happy once again, going into that 4th and wasting his opportunity. And then from there, Ghostwser just kind of had a bigger economy and got the better of the trades. But definitely, that game was well within Puck's grasp. That has to hurt to lose that.
Yeah, it was actually really unfortunate to watch, and it was also a really important point to bring up, the fact that Puck was not able to touch Ghostwser's economy for pretty much the entire game. We saw that one piece of Oracle harassment, and then there was nothing else following that one up. Never a Warp Prism play, never a run-by. It was all these big engagements. Ghostwser sitting on 6 or 7 hatcheries, pretty... I mean, you've got to think about the amount of money that just simply comes in from that. The ability to just remax. We're seeing 30 roaches and 15 hydras being built at once, and still the bank not being exhausted. I mean, he was more lava limited than cash limited there.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, that he just kept pounding home the main attacks, the big attacks. And those bases, Ghost User had 5 or 6 bases, but he was being aggressive the whole time. He never had the time to sit back and build up static defense or anything like that. Those were pretty much naked bases. Any kind of 5 or 6 Zealot Warp Ins, Warp Prism running around would have done massive damage and would have forced Ghost User out of position, so Puck could have actually taken a good aggressive battle. Because every time Puck tried to get aggressive, was caught totally out of position. Ghost User was getting the much better engagements, except for when Puck was defending those bases. So that harassment you mentioned, that would have been also game-changing, would have allowed Puck to get back in there even after some of those bad battles, just because Ghost User was so exposed to it. But none of that from Puck, just those head-on attacks that really didn't work out that well.
Yep, very, very unfortunate there for Root as they lose one of their players that advanced in this particular tournament. And now we have a situation where Ghost User is in the round of 4 and will be playing tomorrow against either Kane or QXC. So we will either get to see a Zerg versus Zerg there. Definitely not Ghost User's strongest matchup, or we will get to see a Zerg versus Terran, which, as far as I'm concerned, is where Ghost User is really in his element.
Yeah, it seems like every tournament match he plays, Ghost User is getting CVTs. And, he's lost some matches, even losing to Drunken Boy, like we were talking earlier, but he's also had some great matches, like the match against Bomber. The fabled 2-hour
oh dear God
Newkirk Precinct game. So as boring as that was to watch, he did play it very well, and definitely has a good handle on the ZVT matchup. So maybe he'd prefer that. But then again, it is QXC, and QXC is an incredibly frustrating player to play against, especially if he brings out his Widow Mine heavy mech styles. So I'm not really sure who a Ghost User would prefer. He might just want a Zerg to avoid the Widow Mines.
That's very much a possibility there. All right, well, the next matchup will in fact be Kane versus QXC. We will find out who will be going up against Ghost User in the round of 4, which of course best of 7. For those of you wondering how exactly that works, well, 5 map pool, and the map pool will be refreshed after the 5th map, so everything becomes up for grabs in the last 2, and the smaller map pool very much there because it makes it easier for players to practice, and the overwhelming pro response was a smaller map pool is best.
Yeah, it certainly is. The less maps you have to prepare for, the better you can be on them, and the better games you'll get.
All right, well, we're going to be taking a short break while we set up the next match, folks. Ghost User advances to the round of 4. Will it be Kane versus QXC to face him in the round of 4 tomorrow? We will find out after this break, folks. You are watching ShoutCraft America, cast by myself and Greg Idrfield. We will be right back.